Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It's wild how disrespectful some kids can be these days. Let's start our video with a story in which a bunch of kids called our OP an ugly Karen. Got called a Karen by some kids. I'm just beefed and want to get this out of my brain. I took my 3-year-old twins to the park. It was pretty empty. A dad with his daughter, a grandma, and her granddaughter, and a group of 5 or 6 kids. I'm guessing around age 10. The group of kids were running around and climbing everything, playing grounder. My twins minding their own business, playing and climbing where they can. I realized my one twin's at the top of the playground at the slide, and all the kids are up there too. I can hear their game getting more intense, and I know my twin gets intimidated around a lot of new people. Then I hear someone yelling, "Move, kid! Kid, move it!" I get into view and tell them, "Don't yell at him, he's a toddler." They apologize, but their little ringleader of the group talks over and says, "He's in the way." I told them he might be intimidated, give him a minute. I address my twin and tell him to come down the slide, and he does. The ringleader kid jumps down in a mocking voice, goes, "Don't yell at him." I'm like, okay. Then does a sassy hand and head sort of movement and goes, "Bye, Felicia." Okay, bye. Then he turns to the rest of the kids and announces that I'm a Karen. My twins keep playing, the bigger kids keep playing, they start swearing. The grandmother asked them to stop swearing. I wasn't paying attention to how they responded to her. My other twin was at ground level talking to me when the ringleader kid comes running by, very close to my twin. Does that thing where they put their hand up as if they're dodging someone. I'm not dealing with this. I picked them up, brought them over to the car, out of earshot of the kids, and explained the kids at this park were not playing very nice and will go to another park. As I'm putting them into the car, I can hear the ringleader kid yelling, telling the other kids that Karen is leaving, ugly Karen is leaving. I'm not fighting a 10-year-old. I'm also stunned that kids talk back like that to strangers. Am I naive? Fortunately, most kids have adults in their lives who are modeling kind and considerate behavior, but the kids who are out of control can be really rude. And our second story. Dealership pulled bait and switch. It cost them over $50K. The city I live in has extremely inflated vehicle values compared to the surrounding areas. If you buy the same car from a neighboring state, you can often save $3 to $4K without really trying. When I buy a new vehicle, which happens every 3 to 4 years, I always look in the surrounding states to compare pricing. This story happened about 5 years ago and still ongoing to this day. I was shopping for a new car, brand new, and found one that matched my specs about 12 hours away in a neighboring state. It was priced about $5,000 below comps. After looking up flights, there was a one-way direct flight that took me to their local airport for around $175, plus the gas to drive back. I was looking at a total of maybe $275 to save $5,000. Absolutely worth it in this situation. I reached out to the dealership, negotiated a bit, and agreed on a price. I let them know that I would be flying in to pick up the car and offered to pay in full in advance of the flight. They told me that all they needed was a $1K deposit and that the car was considered mine. We signed a contract and I paid the deposit. And then I booked the flight for 3 days from then. First sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the airport, the dealership was supposed to pick me up. This had been arranged in advance. A quick phone call later, and I grabbed an Uber to take me the 20 miles to the dealership with the promise of them covering that cost. No big deal either way. Second sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the dealership, the salesman I had been speaking with asked me if I wanted to walk the lot with him to look at a few cars. Yes, cars, plural. Questioning what he meant by that, we walked into the lot to see these cars that he was talking about. Were these some special type of gold inlaid, full self-driving, full self-flying amaze-mobiles? No, they were not. When I point-blank asked to see the car that I was buying, the one with VIN XYZ listed in this signed contract with a deposit on it, I was told it was no longer available. The salesman offered to show me similar cars, which would have been fine if we were able to come to similar terms or pricing, but all these cars, outrageously priced. Think $2K over MSRP instead of $5K under MSRP. Important note for later, there was never a mention or any paperwork, signage, etc. of any incentives for giving 5-star reviews. Fast forward 2 to 3 hours. I'm now convinced this dealership never had the specific car on the lot and that it was 100% a bait and switch gone wrong. The dealership was unwilling to sell me a similar vehicle at a similar price to our negotiated one. We were over $5,000 apart and were unwilling to pay the flight costs for this bait and switch scenario. A heated discussion ensued between myself and the GM where he told me to go ahead and leave a bad review, but that I wasn't getting any free money from him. I took an Uber to a nearby hotel and booked a flight back home for the next day. Total cost around $750. This dealership had an average Google rating of right around 4.5 stars and around 400 total reviews. Pretty solid for a dealership. That night, while I was sitting in the hotel room, I had some time to burn. I spent a couple of hours creating new email accounts just so that I could leave multiple reviews for this dealership. All said and done, I had left around 20 one-star reviews over the course of that night and then sort of stopped caring about the reviews. At this point, my focus shifted to recovering my lost travel expenses. A few days after getting back, I sent the dealership a demand letter for $750, which they promptly ignored. Since we'd done the original contract with the deposit in both states, I was allowed to file a small claims suit in my state, which I did. The dealership never showed up to court, and I received a default judgment for $750. I did collect that, by the way. It took a few certified letters, a few phone calls, and about a year, but I did get a check for $750. As you can imagine, I was still not a happy camper. What they done was wrong on so many levels. All my friends knew the story of how I was bait and switched, and the fact that I flew to the dealership on a one-way ticket only made it that much worse. They'd all left a bad review or two, but nothing more than a normal mad customer. I don't know how it started or how it ended up lasting as long as it has, but at some point I had some time on my hands and left a bad review for this dealership. Not one, not two, not three, one. In doing so, I noticed that all of the reviews I'd left right after leaving the dealership were gone. Probably taken down for being fake or because I'd left so many at the same time and the dealership reported them. I wanted to make sure that this dealership wouldn't do this to someone else, so the next day I checked to make sure that one bad review I had left was still there. It was. And since I was thinking about it, I went ahead and created another account and left another one-star review. Fast forward 2 to 3 years. It's now become a habit. Every time I have a few minutes to spare, I create a new account and leave a one-star review for this dealership. Their current rating, 1.9 stars with nearly 3.5K total reviews. I am personally responsible for at least half of those reviews. When you open the dealer's website, one of the large banners that flashes across the screen advertises $50 for a 5-star review. Something about showing the review to your salesman to get a $50 Visa gift card. It's been this way since about a year after this bait and switch occurred, right around the time the one-star reviews began to accumulate. Assuming I'm responsible for half of their reviews and the fact that the dealership only has 3.5K total reviews, they've paid $50 per review for at least 1,000 reviews. Likely more than that. Meaning they've implemented a policy to pay for reviews, having spent $50K doing so, and have still seen their average rating drop consistently since telling me to go ahead and leave a bad review. Edited to add, yes, I got my $1K deposit back. I paid with a credit card and it was refunded without issue. I couldn't sue for time spent or force the contract to be honored because I sued in small claims court. Time spent not allowable and contract too high of a value for small claims. And yes, the case was 100% winnable if I were to have sued to force the contract to be honored, but legal fees would have needed to hire an attorney, and the additional time spent meant this was just not worth pursuing. You should reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to pay $50 to turn your one-star review into 5 stars. Then rinse and repeat. Even more profit. And our last story. Entitled neighbor thinks that my wife shouldn't be allowed out of the house. I live in a very friendly community in Sydney, Australia. Almost everyone knows everyone else and gets along really well, We've been here for over 20 years now, and I wouldn't live anywhere else. Firstly, my wife is blind. She's a bit famous both for being a successful medical practitioner in the area and because she's done a lot of public speaking on blindness and has been featured in a few ads with her guide dog. Around 10 years ago, a new family moves in about 10 houses down from us. It comprises entitled neighbor equals Maria, entitled kids 1 to 3 equals EK 1 through 3, poor dad equals Paul. They obviously own the new franchise of a fairly well-known Australian dessert chain. They have the company van in their driveway whenever hardworking Paul happens to be home. I'm guessing he worked 13 to 15-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. Poor guy. My wife likes to go for walks around the area with her guide dog. It's her main form of exercise and a way for her to bump into and chat with the members of the community who know and like her. At the time, our daughter was still a baby and in a pram, so my wife towed the pram behind her when she walked. That was actually the subject of one of the ads she was in. As she walks past this house, their dog runs out and attacks her guide dog. She was on her own, but fortunately another neighbor saw it and pulled the dog away while she went home. She tells me about it, but we think, well, they're new here and maybe one of the kids let the dog out. It's illegal to have a dog off-leash anywhere in public in Sydney other than certain designated parks and beaches. A couple of days later, the same thing happens again. This time, the dog ran all the way to our house from theirs and attacked her dog. Fortunately, I heard her scream. Came out and dragged the dog off her. This time, I went over to Maria's house to complain about their dog. Me. Hi there. I live up the road and your dog keeps attacking my wife's guide dog. Maria. Why is this my problem? Me. You realize that it's illegal for your dog to be outside your yard off-leash, don't you? My kids like playing out front with the dog. Well, can you please get a gate? Your dog shouldn't be running loose on the road. Maybe your wife shouldn't be out loose on the road. At this point, I realized this was a waste of time, so I returned home and we called the police. Remember, wife blind, well-known community member, very strict dog laws. The police come over and we tell them the story. They take notes and say that her actions constitute assault on my wife, not just breaking the law by letting their dog out. They ask if we'd like to press charges. We say no, but can you talk to her about not letting their dog out of the yard? They agree and say they'll further warn her that if they get another complaint of this sort, the dog will be seized. A few days later, my wife wants to go for another walk, but she's still a bit shaken by the 2 attacks, so she asked me to come with her. As we walk past Maria's house, EK 1 through 3 are in the front yard. When they see us, they immediately lie on the ground and play dead. I notice Maria watching and ask what's going on. She says, well, if you're going to get our dog killed, you might as well get our kids killed as well. A few days later, our doorbell rings. I answer, and the man there introduces himself as Maria's husband, Paul. He says that one of their direct neighbors saw what was going on with his wife, kids, and their dog and told him about it. He apologized profusely for what his wife and children have been doing and says it'll never happen again. Paul seemed like a very nice, if exhausted, guy. I said that this is a close community and everyone likes to get along. Paul replied that he could see that. Flash forward to maybe 2 months later and we notice that house is up for sale and we never see the company van in the driveway. It turns out they were going through a divorce and had to sell the house, after being there less than a year, and the business to split things up. I'm not saying the incident with my wife caused the divorce, but I'm sure it contributed to it. Unfortunately, his working so hard all the time left his entitled wife to bring up 3 entitled kids. They're going to face some hard knocks in the future, but it looks like the trash took itself out. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.